So we'll call the Wenham Town Government Study Committee meeting to order. It is December 2nd at 7:03 p.m. And in attendance, we have Harriet Davis, Kirsten Alexander, Dave Anderson, Roger Smerge, David Parati, and Pat Waddell, and Paul Weaver, ex officio. Mike Lucy will not be joining us, neither will Ryan for our town administrator. Welcome all. So we do have minutes to approve, the November 18th. Actually, let me stop that there. There's no public in the waiting room, but we'll pause for public comment. Just as a matter of course. Let me shut the door. Hearing none, we'll move on to the minutes from November 18th. And we just lost Roger. Any edits to the minutes? Any motion to approve?
You're muted.
Sorry, I hadn't finished reading them. Motion to approve.
Second.
Excellent. Harriet?
Aye.
Kirsten?
Aye.
Dave?
Aye.
Roger, difficulties, Deidre?
Yes.
That one, yes as well. So we've got that. So continue the 3 to 5 deliberation. I know Paul has asked that he be given some time to go over some concerns he has with the majority report. So if everyone's okay, we'll give the floor to Paul. And
hey, thank you for your patience. I wrote it down so I can send it along if anybody actually cares about it after the fact. My 40 years as town council gave me a lot of experience with Wenham's 3-member board and a fair amount with 5-member boards in other towns. I came into this process having felt for years that 3 was better for Wenham. Those of you who came in as proponents of 5 have raised some very good arguments in favor of advantages of a 5-member board. Personally, I regard it as a jump ball issue for the voters, who, if properly informed of the ramifications, can judge which board size best aligns with their view of the town's needs. There are some elements of the process and the resulting majority report draft that trouble me. Most significantly, the dilution of the value of the most experienced interviews that we received, and the select board town administrator structure issue, which is more or less not addressed at all. I regard some of the rationales in the majority report to be misleading or just wrong. I would prefer that your case to the voters be made on the legitimate benefits of a 5-member board. During my time as town council through 2015, Wenham's 3-member board experienced no quorum problems, no need for rule of necessity, no conflicts of interest or policy deadlocks preventing action on important town business. During Jeff Chelgren's tenure, there was enduring tension between him and the board about his desire to be in charge and Harriet and act on matters beyond the routine operations without consulting the board. This led to the 2012 Town Government Study Committee, which recommended giving specified operational powers to the Office of the TA to free the board for long-term policy and planning matters. This is a major argument for a 5-member board as well, with greater diversity. But that benefit in Wenham and in most other 5-member towns also requires that the board get out of routine operations, which to be left to the TA's office. In my view, the majority arguments in favor of a 5-member board can only be true if coupled with a formal empowerment of the TA's office to operate the town on routine matters. to issue a recommendation to enlarge the board not conditioned on parallel article to give defined operational power to the TA is misleading. There is one reason why that was not done in 2012. Jack Wilhelm. He was unwilling to relinquish even menial powers to the TA. He was the 300-pound gorilla select person you vilify in the majority report. He was the 100-year flood select person during my 40 years. I count Jack as a friend, one who served the town for many years, but only on his own terms. He could be a real pain in the ass and was a special problem I had to manage for years. I've been gone for 5 years, but my understanding is that this change to 5 members has a primary foundation in personal disputes with Jack's policies or actions or lack thereof. I think to make a likelihood that more Jacks will come along to browbeat the board in the future is a weak argument at best. So quick word about John Clemenzi. John was a friend of mine for the my entire time in Wenham, volunteered in many town positions before becoming a select member. He was loyal, but not a leader. Perhaps what happened after I left town was that he ended up in Jack's pocket. Whatever his inadequacies, he is not, in my view, a fair or accurate reason to change the board size. A couple of other points. Supporters of both 3 and 5 have and do contend that tough decision-making is easier with one or the other. My experience has been that a 2-2-1 deadlock on a 5-member board is more likely than a 2-2-1 1-1-1 member on a 3-member board where 2 are firmly opposed. The 3rd member either agrees or has to choose one or the other for action to happen on essential issues. So in my view, neither the majority or the minority report should use the better or easier decision-making as a rationale. It's all pure guesswork and therefore not probative of the issue. As noted above, I regard the rule of necessity, quorum, and conflict arguments to be without merit, as I suggested above. The majority draft speaks of positioning Wenham to solve problems of the future. Your arguments that 5 members will be better only works, in my view, if coupled with a strong TA change at the same time. The select board is fully capable of acting on your recommendation and presenting both the change to 5 and the formal grant of TA authority in articles to a forthcoming town meeting. Given the experience with the current TA job description, I'm sure the board can reach consensus to codify the recent practices that have worked and couple it with the option to change the board to 5 members. I urge you to condition your report on such a pairing. A key assumption of the majority is that 5 seats will magically produce multiple more select board candidates. Obviously, those of us who have been involved and watching these races and begging people to run are dubious about that. But the majority has no data to support that. Again, I mean, you probably could have signed up 10 people to say they would run if it happens or something like that, but no, it hasn't happened. Again, this is pure speculation. It's a shot in the dark, a false argument. No one knows what would happen. Finally, I hope you all recall the many issues like insurance benefits for stipend board members that came out of the woodwork, things with significant legal and financial implications, none of which are addressed in the recommendation to simply increase the board by 2 members. As with the town administrator's select board formal authority debate, these should be listed as conditions to be resolved before a change to 5 vote can become effective. I thank all of you for your very hard work and fair and courteous debate over our long COVID odyssey studying these many weighty issues. Thank you.
Let me take up the first issue. And
Can I just ask one clarifying question, Patrick, and then you can go? What were the 3 arguments that you think don't have merit? You said quorum, rule of necessity, and what was the 3rd?
Conflict of interest. I mean, if that's really all one ball of wax. There was a problem last year in Wenham that was the result of 2 people departing without coordinated communication because it could have been avoided. But again, in my personal view, there was never any problems with a 3-member board on any of those issues at any time in my 40 years preceding since 2015. So I think my point here is that in my view, the problems have to do with a single selectman over that whole time period who is unique in my experience. And as I said, could be difficult, but anyway, that's that. Sorry, thank you. Longer answer than you wanted.
And I would just say the impetus for the citizens petition was the situation that arose with Jack and John. But at my first town meeting in 2008, when I looked at the front of the room, I said, oh, there's the Board of Selectmen and there's whoever else. I looked at the 5 and said, that's going to be the selectmen. I looked at the 3 and said, I don't know who they are. Quickly, I realized that was the FinCom that was 5 members, and that was the Board of Selectmen with 3 members. And I said, this is crazy. And that was before any of this. And I would also cite that we have had issues with 3, and I would cite Maple Woods. So Maple Woods, when it first came up, there was a buzz saying, we get the 40B issue. And at that point, it was Ken Whitaker, Molly Martins, and Patrick Wilson. And they told me directly, oh, don't worry about it. We got it taken care of. We got something in the works. And it was let out that, oh, there's something over at Burnett's garage. But it was never public. So I would say there, we had an OML issue before I really knew what the OML was, because I was not on any boards at that point. But there was obviously something cooking, but it was not public. And that's an OML issue. So I think these issues have been around long before Jack and John. I think Jack and John, as Tom Younger has said, are the spark that lit the fire.
Yeah.
So I think it goes much deeper than just Jack and John. I think they were just the final straw. And as the person who submitted the citizens petition, that's why it came about.
Yeah, I mean, I understand, and as I say, I acknowledge the fact that I didn't watch the last 5 years. So, so I don't know what those issues are. I will say, with respect to affordable housing over there on Maple Street, I mean that really, yes, that was a mess and a half. And quite frankly, that whole thing was handled off board because I was still town council at that time, and that thing also took place outside. I mean, I think there were people barking up different trees, let's call it. So I don't really, not familiar with that, not contesting it one way or the other. I just want to reiterate again, I think there are legitimate arguments either way, and I think fairly presented. I think, and some of these arguments I've made in the past, by the way. So, but as I've now baked it all down and seen the whole thing, I just feel like some of these arguments should be set aside. It should be kept as simple as possible. I think the arguments about diversity and so forth pretty much stand entirely on their own. And it's all you need to say, other than, in my view, you need to acknowledge the fact that a board who ceases becoming qualified and active in town administrative matters really needs to have a TA who can run the ship. And they decide where the ship should go. And that, in my view, that's the strength of a 5-person board with an empowered office of town administrator, or town manager, whatever you want to call it.
Just on that point, so I think it seemed like we had discussion about that, and that we don't have that as part of the purview of this committee. But any 5-member board or 3-member board can give certain day-to-day responsibilities to a town administrator in our current format. Is that correct?
There's a job description, which is changeable at will by the board.
Right, so they could give more responsibility to a TA, which could be a transitionary step to having a more formal, strong town manager position. And that may be something that should be spelled out, but it does kind of get into the minutia of, and different towns run town administrator or town manager differently as well.
Well, I understand, and I'm only suggesting that Wenham set up the office how Wenham wants the office set up.
Mhm.
If how it's working now is set up, it does. the advantage or the principal difference here is that anything the town administrator does now can be revoked and undone, or he can be pulled back from something he's been working on because the board decides they don't care about that. And in again, this is the 2012 recommendation on operational matters, however you want to define them, that you put the town administrator in charge of making those decisions. That includes hiring and firing and a bunch of stuff like that. And the role of the board on those matters becomes one of evaluating the performance of the town administrator. And you either think he's great, or you think they're terrible and you run them off, or you make suggestions for improvements in future years. You know how that works. Deirdre knows how that works. That's the principal difference. And in my view, it's not per se relevant that they didn't ask us to study that. I'm perfectly happy, and I in fact will express my opinion to the board, since to some degree, I guess I was sent here as an emissary or a resource for them. That is my opinion. But I guess I'm thinking I would have a hard time going for 5, saying we don't care who the town administrator is, we just want 5 people. And all the studying I've done suggests that by and large, the 5 boards work when they're not responsible for the day-to-day actions. And that's the reason I think they should be coupled. And I think the board oughtn't to have a problem dealing with that recommendation.
Well, I will agree with you. I do believe that we should have a town administrator with more authority. But that was brought to this board and it fell on deaf ears. And I don't think that this should be, the 3 to 5 issue should be sidelined until we get there. And I don't think it should be predicated upon it. I think that 5 would be more apt to take this up than 3. We have 3, you know, when I brought it to the board, it was silence. So we have 3 members and no one took it up. So it's outside our purview, but I think we continue to march forward. And in my hope, we get to the town administrator duties, roles and responsibilities soon. I would like to see this committee with its current membership or new membership continue, because I think there are real issues that we still could tackle. The town administrator, appointed versus elected. I think we have some serious issues that, you know, that are going to be pushed off for a couple of years until we get 5, and then maybe it gets taken back up.
Yeah.
Or the next person gets seated and brings them up then.
Yeah, I think just to understand this is a redo of the 2012 situation. And at the crux of this issue, selectman versus town administrator, is this question of day-to-day control. I think the board that Harriet was on and when Jack got on it, you know, and at that time there was a good deal of skepticism about who this town administrator was at the time. And quite frankly, he was off the reservation and had delusions of grandeur about his role or what he was trying to build himself up to do. And I don't mean he's a bad person, but he had ambitions and he had certain training, and he was trying to work on that and trying to get rid of anybody who stood in his way. So that's a unique situation. And no, I'm sorry, I've lost my train of thought, which happens to me now. Don't ever get old, guys.
Too late.
Working anyway. Yeah.
It's better than the alternative.
I think the point is that if you want to not change the historical Wenham, you know, then don't change the historical Wenham and keep a more intimate board that sort of has the town administrators, the Jiminy Cricket, to work on their ear and do their scut work. But if you want to have proper professional town management to deal with those future problems, which are sophisticated and which maybe haven't been getting done for whatever sets of reasons, then you empower a professional to come in and do it. And then you have 5 people in your evaluation of it, 5-person to judge the effectiveness of the leadership and management he's providing. And at the same time, to be doing the strategic plan, the master plan. You correctly point out there's a lot of business that seems not to get done that ought to get done. And I can't speak to that. But I think that an empowered or strong TA, however broad it is, charged by the board with doing the job in the same way a CEO would be charged with doing the job, is going to get more done. And frankly, you may attract stronger candidates in the future. I mean, there was a lot of discussion in the past and in the 2012 thing about how difficult it may be to get someone for a position with no power and no authority, and having to kowtow to a group of individuals who don't know what you know. So, you know, there's a lot of issues here, and in my view, the 5 and the strong town administrator are just really the alternative to the status quo.
Dave, you have something?
I want to ask a question about the even in the majority response to the minority, we concede that there's a lack of talent, which we believe is a temporary problem. And I've heard a bunch of times, that, if we go to 5, it's going to be, I don't know if it was even hedged, but I'll say that it was hedged and say it may become less qualified as a board, or it'll become unqualified. I obviously am by far the least experienced in Wenham of all of you, but the limited time I've been here, I've seen enough to have no reason to believe that we have a problem filling key elected positions in this town. I mean, has there ever been an instance where a select board seat has not been filled? And maybe that is the case. I mean, I realize there are other committees with appointments that have been open. Okay, that's fine. But select board, I would be interested to know more about that, because what I know in a lot of examples is, hold on, I'm on this. I'll give me 5 minutes. Parental duty is that I've seen. Look, I'll be vague about this. I was going to run for a position, and I didn't go because I knew that another guy was running, and he was not only qualified, but he probably would have cleaned my clock. I didn't have to show up to that fight because I knew that there was someone else was running, and I had enough on my plate. There was a contested race, and then the next one was not contested. I'm talking about the select board now, but that's because I think of a similar situation. And so I just really wonder, I personally being biased, new to coming to town, this notion that, the board will become less qualified or unqualified to expand the number of seats at the table, I think is a dangerous concept. Extremely dangerous concept. And I just wonder if I just would challenge that premise that, one, there's not enough people to fill this, qualified people to sit at the table. And by that, I mean, I look around this town, my neighbors on Main Street, these are high performing people all around this town. And these are people who, if we can convince them and say, hey, look, you're not going to get mired in a bunch of nonsense, but we need you, Uncle Sam, Uncle Cheeseman, or whoever, we need you to help solve the issue of development here, affordable housing, bringing down the tax rate or bringing up revenue so that we don't have to keep going on tax rate. I just wonder, is this really an issue? I would love to hear the argument, and maybe Harriet and Paul with their experience, or others, can explain this concept that there's a paucity of people and the rest are somehow unqualified. Maybe Roger has something to say about that. Thank you for letting me say that.
I wouldn't make the unqualified thing. I would say or the distinction that cuts some weight with me is the advice from many, well, certainly all the people I interviewed, former selectmen in Wenham and Hamilton and such places, is that the importance of the people coming to selectmen knowing something about how town government works. That's why a lot of FinCom members graduate to the select board. The advantage of a diverse board is that you get people maybe who don't have that, but maybe bring a different perspective to it. But at the same time, if those people without any experience or knowledge of how the town actually operates, if there are 5 of them there and no town administrator who's actually qualified or authorized to make the operational decisions, that's a problem. It works either way. I think, experienced people there. Now, I think Harriet could probably tell you, but I think there was one contested race over the last decade, and that was when Jack chose to oust Molly Martins, which he did.
Well, what about Catherine's though? Recently, that was a contested race, wasn't it?
Yep.
Yeah.
There was 3
three
candidates.
3 candidates run for that.
And Jack also ran against someone else in his last term.
Again, it's my vacuum of the last 5 years. I can't speak to that stuff. I just, again, my argument here is, I would stop talking about whether there will or won't be enough candidates. I don't think you can tell either way. I would urge the majority and the minority to drop that and focus on other things. Roger's got his hand up.
Roger.
First of all, I'm going to apologize for being a little late to the discussion tonight. I was having technical issues and my Zoom was not accessing my camera, so I had to restart things. So I apologize. My comment is not on this one particular issue, but it's builds off something that Paul's remarks were saying and addresses this issue, but also others that are being discussed both during the deliberations and in the draft reports. And this comment goes to both the majority and the minority. I would urge both sides to draw more upon the empirical data that we were able to collect. I know that maybe that data was not as fulsome or developed as we had hoped when we started this process, but there's a ton of it there. And that data can be used to support aspects of both sides of the argument. So, whether it's citing to numerical data, whether it's drawing upon particular statements or collective statements that can be ascertained from interview responses, whether it's drawing upon comments that were made during the public forum, I think that would go a great way in making the arguments that both sides are trying to make more convincing. That was my big takeaway from reading the 2 draft reports.
So I guess I'll speak, Patrick.
Deirdre.
So I do need to hear from my 3 co-authors, because that section needs to speak for the 4 of us as the majority recommendations, but just a couple of responses to Paul and Roger. So I did, Roger, try to draw on the data, but I guess what I'm hearing is it didn't come through strongly enough.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not going to make concrete observations or suggestions because I think that would be impacting our argument one way or the other, and it's contrary to my stated position of abstaining.
Switzerland stance.
Yes, as town moderator. But I found in reading both the majority and minority sections places where I was like, oh, that argument lands, and it would be supported by, referring to this from the interviews or this statement that we heard during one of the public hearings. So that's the lawyer in me speaking. There's evidence up there, use it to your advantage, both sides.
I think because I wrote the research results It was,
Yeah, I mean,
I felt like I had already done that. So.
And you had done that from a neutral perspective in
Yeah, right.
research, but now I would urge both sides to go through and mine that data for argumentative purposes, because it just really both. And I will say, it was more the majority that felt this in the minority. I think Carrie and Mike did draw upon some of the empirical data more than the majority did. But I not even with the level of specificity that I think could have been developed. It just felt like at times both sides were falling back to the assumptive arguments that we started with, rather than making use of what we've done from a research and investigation standpoint over the course of a year. So that's what I would say.
Right. I'm going to disagree with that a little bit.
You're
You know,
more
I'm
than
not just
welcome
going
to,
to go
Deirdre.
along with everything, right?
Yeah, more than welcome.
Deirdre,
Because-
let me put it
Yeah.
this way, though, shall we say, I found it interesting, the diversity of thoughts that, if you will, the men on the street interviews brought forth. What my problem is I have no concept of how realistic or pervasive or workable a lot of those ideas are. So they're good ideas that the select board should probably wrestle with. But, you know, I set most store by the more experienced people. I was sent here basically because I had a lot of experience. And I feel like that at least in the data, it should be said, these people who have served in town governments think this. These people who haven't think that. It's part of the whole jump ball issue here.
Well,
You know, you may want to throw out everything that went before because you think it sucks, you know, and you may want to just tweak it by putting things on the agenda, you know, for the board. Anyway, sorry.
all right. So a few things. So when I constructed that majority opinion, I actually extensively used the data. So I took exactly the list of pros, because that's the side that I'm working on, that were derived from all of the research. And that research, and I will say, the survey that we did with the public, I have not touched. It's not in the results, and it's not in the, I didn't even look at it. So if it's in there, it was serendipitous, okay? So the people that you're talking about that don't have experience are not in there. The research results that I used to write that section derived exactly from when I did the data analysis of the research that we did, all of the interviews and all of the surveys from the board, committee, and town employees. Those are all people who have experience in town government. Now, there's different levels of experience, but they're all people who have experience in town government. So that entire majority opinion was written based on what all of these people with experience in town government had said, including us, those of us that are part of this committee, because I tried to channel Patrick and Kirsten and Dave as well as myself. Roger, I got a ways to go. So is it specific?
Yeah, my own, I'm not sure my point's going through. My only point is that you did that. You didn't say, you didn't say like in an interview, a former town administrator said this that supports it, or 3 select board members of other towns that have moved to 5 said this and that support. That's all I was saying. I think there's opportunities to do that kind of.
Okay.
Yeah. So go
And
on.
some of that is in the results, so I didn't want to be redundant, and I was trying to not do 10 pages, as I think Paul had said before. It shouldn't be so long. So anyway, now I lost my train of thought.
No, don't
Sorry.
go there.
So it sounds like bringing in a sort of summary of some of the data into this report would be helpful. I was just talking about this with some people who didn't know much of what was going on, and they're like, oh, well, but aren't we this size town, and so we have this, and I'm like, oh, actually, we did that research. So I think it would be helpful for people to have some of that in
Tie it
there
back.
and refer it back when a point is made that is based on
Okay.
the data. I think what Roger's saying is, it makes a lot of sense. And also just to clarify that the data is based on people who have experience with town government, our town government, not random town governments. I mean, that was in there too, other town governments, but specifically people involved in Wenham. And, we do know that the public survey results were very similar, but they were smaller data set, and so we didn't use them.
It might be that the data summary should be before. I'm thinking now of the warrant article, and I've had
It is,
comments.
Paul. Yeah. So I apologize if I'm not being clear. I'm distinguishing between a summary of the data and besides using what data there is to support their arguments. Two different things. So, I'm trying to make that as clear as I can, but without, and it's hard because I don't want to give specific examples, but I just think that opportunity exists for both sides to bolster their cases and it doesn't have to lengthen things significantly. It's not like it would be a recitation of data or deep dive.
Yeah.
It would just be like, if you're hitting a point and there's something that someone said in a public forum that lands, then if you've got that, use it. So both sides.
So David, I read this with another avenue in mind. I read it and said, okay, can I take this to town meeting? Can I stand on the floor of town meeting and run through these points? And I thought it was excellent.
Thank you.
I liked the points, and I said, yeah, I can walk through this. I do hear, and going back to college and writing reports and putting in quotes here and there, it strengthens an argument. So I hear that. But I do think that the arguments are I do believe the arguments are sound. And maybe pull this selectman said this and put it one data point, one quote, what have you, in each of the arguments. But I do like what you've done, and I thank you for doing it.
Thanks.
Patrick, if I could jump in here. I've listened to this, I've read this, and I find it interesting, but not critical. Right now, the town has issues facing it. I don't hear a lot of uproar about the selectmen and the need to increase it. I think that we're making a mountain out of a molehill. I'd like to suggest that we come up with some clear one-line reasons why we're interested in bringing this forward, and what do we really see as a result of it. Not interested in surveys and whatnot. We've done that. We've taken that in. We're thinking about it. And now we need to draft something very simple, which says, given X, Y, and Z problems, we think that this is worth bringing forward to the town as we're struggling over the tax rate, over the problems with the schools, with the various other problems that we have, rather than we're creating an issue that I don't think is a pressing issue in town.
That, of course, is your opinion. I will completely disagree with that opinion. I believe we do have some real issues in town, and I think that the select board is too focused on day-to-day management and needs to be long-term thinkers. The tax rate is a great example. The tax rate, it's not new, but it hasn't changed. Everyone talks about, oh, we're going to develop this, we're going to do that. Nothing has happened. Our tax rate continues to go up. It's a huge, and I think the majority of people don't understand the enormity of that problem, because once we hit 2.5%, we're done. We're tapped out. We're not getting above it. You can't tax your way out of this. But
It's a
nothing has
revenue
been-
problem, as Win Dodge identified back in the 90s when he was chairman of the FinCom. We have champagne tastes on a beer pocketbook. We've talked about having some more businesses in town. Nobody is giving any land. Nobody wants a office park in their backyard. I agree with what you said about the tax rate, but how do we raise revenue? That's a critical issue. And I'd rather we spend our time thinking about that. Maybe we can do something. Paul, Boulder Lane, yet again. We have got to raise revenue. There's no point in having more people on a select board to come up with policy. What can they come up with? We have wrangled with this problem. I've been involved in it for 20, 25 years. It isn't a question of putting 2 more bodies on the select board.
Kirsten.
With all due respect, Harriet, a super majority of people at town meeting asked us to look at this. So that is why, and felt that it was important enough to bring to all of this work and then come back to them with a recommendation. So of course it's important. They gave us this charge. So yeah, to solve all those problems with more bodies potentially. So.
Dave?
Yeah, and you know, personally, Harriet, I agree with what you're saying in the sense of the issues that we have. And I will say, I will credit Deirdre with a great point, which is, you know, we have a master plan from the 1960s, and we have a lot of bylaws and and regulations that are from the 80s, not the bylaws, but the regulations. We're in a process, at least the planning board, of doing the master plan, of doing the regulations. That is the only avenue, I believe, that, or let's put it this way, it's a chief component of the way to get forward to explore any revenue. Let's take the planning board. I got to be a little careful, but I'll say this: our hands are tied based on the archaic, based on what we have at our disposal. Once we get a master plan in place, which, by the way, is going to take a ton of effort, and thank goodness we have a 5-person board with a heavy delegation to our town planning coordinator, but it's a tremendous amount of work. And then somebody's got to go forward with this thing, and it's going to take all hands on deck. And we have the 40B situation. We're going to have to figure that out as well. These are issues that are going to consume this town, and we need as many leaders as possible to take these on and delegate these things. And I will say personally, having on a 5-person board dealing with heavy issues, having appeared in front of the HDC a number of times with 7 members, I love big boards. Big boards, you don't know who's going to step up and say, I care about this issue. But you know, it's like there's more minds at the table. There's more people paying attention. There's more people who are prepared to show up for any given issue. And it's almost like, you know, you want to say, what are the top 5 issues in Wenham? That's not tough to come up with the top 5 issues in Wenham. And the obtuse point I'm trying to make is that's a lot easier than saying the top 3 issues. And if you just look at a parity, it's like 3 members of the select board, 5 members of the select board, all of these issues that we have to confront. To me, it's a no-brainer to have more people at the table carrying through on these issues, given the path that lies ahead. One other point I just want to tuck in at the end was the minority section was like a 1-pager. Was I reading the right thing?
It's 2 pages.
It goes edited. It goes onto a 2nd page.
Just barely, yeah.
There are
Okay.
2 documents in there. One says edited.
Well,
I was hoping Mike was here so that we could talk to Mike and Harriet and say which one is the accepted. I'm trying to move documents out of this folder that are not the accepted documents. So Mike edited you'll see the yellow in the document. Harriet, are you okay with this being the minority report?
Yeah, I'm just, different fonts made it go longer or shorter.
It's the one with
Printed it up.
the minority report in yellow. He highlighted what he changed.
So the one thing that's in there that we just clarified is incorrect, is that the majority report lumped in together responses from the general public and those from experienced former select board members, committee and board members. So that's not accurate. I would recommend not accepting that change.
Yes, I second that as well. It's completely not accurate.
But I don't think that as minority majority, I don't think it's the majority's place to change the minority report.
Sure, I'm just making a recommendation.
I agree with the point, but I think we should leave that to the majority, the minority to change that.
I just wanted to
Except
say
where
on,
it's inaccurate. I mean, I think that's a legitimate. Sorry, Dave.
no, it's okay. I agree. The minority can say whatever they want. It can be a colored picture of Big Bird. I don't know. You do whatever you want. But the point about suboptimal methodology, I just took a little bit of offense is too strong because I would never be offended. I love everybody in this town and everybody on this board. But we didn't have McKinsey come in. We didn't have Accenture come in, but we did the best with what we had. And we didn't get the response rates maybe on some aspects, but I think anybody that looks at this can see what we did, can see what we got back, and can evaluate the responses and the data that we got. And so I just felt kind of for the integrity of the committee, I would be careful to swipe at the data too hard because I just don't think that's fair. And I think it doesn't move the issue forward. You could say it could be something like, we didn't get as many responses or we didn't get the full 100% response rate, but to say overall that the data we got was somehow tainted or suboptimal, I really would want some hard thought on that to make sure that we're not compromising the integrity of the committee. Thank you.
Well said.
Respectfully,
Well said,
respectfully,
Dave.
please.
Well said.
I think Deirdre, if the data set contains, as I suspect it would or should, contains arguments for both sides, then, I think that's an important point to say. Again, as I say, I think you can make, arguments, two reasonable people can be on opposite sides of a given issue. And that was why my suggestion was, if the data set is in fact objective and even-handed, then that, in my view, that should be, here's the data we pulled up, let everybody see the data, and then the majority will argue based on the data and our judgment, we think the following, and then the minority can say based on the data and our view, we think the opposite. So I like that construct as a sort of envisioning the warrant article.
But did you read the research results section? Because that's where I did that. That's not the majority report. So the research results section is separate.
No, I didn't. And throughout this thing, I've been baffled by the Google Docs to the point.
And actually, Paul, because you need to read it, because I actually did what you asked me to do.
Okay, fine. I apologize for.
Make sure that you say like 2 out of 3 and 5 out of 6 select people. And I did that for you.
Bless your heart. Thank you. That's terrific.
And
Let me say that my impression, if I admit totally to not doing the homework, if you don't have a vote, you don't necessarily want to do all that much work. And I'm mostly meant to be a sounding board, but I think if it's presented that way, then that makes good sense. And I feel like the increasingly, and what I said tonight is probably a change from what I would have thought before tonight when I tried to think through it, and I was really keying off the majority report, and I ended up thinking arguments that I've seen for 3 and 5, that there are a number of them which people use, and they come up in other towns, which is probably where they came from. But in our case in particular, I think they're too speculative to be probative. The real issue is, I think, the one you're talking about. How do you plan with all the problems facing the town? Shouldn't there be more hands on deck? It's Dave's point. So I'm in favor of that, and letting the data be the data, and let it be argued one side and the other.
Go ahead, Roger.
Two things. One, I did take Deirdre's summary of the data and work it into the, I'm going to call it the master document. It doesn't have to be, but I set it up to be a master document if we want it to be, and synthesized it with the background I had included in my first draft. I did, Deirdre, include a short description of the public survey and the results we got from it, because I think it is important to include all the data we gathered, for better or for worse. So I did include that, just so that everyone's clear. Second point, I think it is perfectly fair to criticize the data collection or the data that we were able to gather, but it is imperative to do so in a respectful manner. I know that could be seen at odds. How do you criticize and be respectful? But it's a exercise in deploying tact, and I think that can be done. But it's perfectly fair to say the data is inconclusive on something. We didn't get enough results. Whether you think we didn't get enough results from other towns that have looked at the issue, whether you don't think we got enough responses from our former select board members, whatever it may be, perfectly fair to criticize the data where it's warranted. And I would just urge everyone, when they're doing so and when they're responding to the opposition arguments, to do so respectfully, because I think, to echo Dave's point, the 7 of us plus Paul plus Ryan plus Tom, we all hold each other in a great deal of esteem, and we want the report to reflect that.
Yeah, and I actually very consciously tried to be respectful. So I think if anyone, particularly my co-authors, think that there's something that isn't, I certainly would take it out, because I have no desire to be disrespectful. And Paul, I think you and I have very different lenses. I think we both know. I have only the lens on town government from the last few years, so it's after you've departed. I've never met either Jack Wilhelm or John Clemenzi in my life, and I probably never will. So all I know about them is what I saw on Zoom once I was home in quarantine and started watching town government. So, and it was quite a show. And so it's derived from that, not any desire to personally attack anyone. And I have basically learned a lot about municipal government in the last couple of years, but I have a lot of experience in management and leadership. And so some of those comments were derived from also what I think represents good and appropriate leadership and management practice. And I actually really feel strongly about the management section of that. And I feel very informed and able to speak to that. I also would say, because I think we all now feel like we know where everyone came in on, right? And we probably kind of did, but I will tell you that I came into this committee thinking that 5 was probably a good idea, but really not sure. I was not convinced, and I didn't really know enough to know whether that was the right path, but I found it intriguing. But I will tell you that through the course of this committee and doing the research and analyzing it and looking at other town reports and all of the stuff that we've done, I have become convinced. And I want to actually be very clear about that, because I didn't come into this with an agenda saying I have to make this happen. I actually wasn't sure, but I am sure now. And I do think, and I hear the points about reflecting the data in the final argument, and I don't disagree with that. But I also think our job now was to distill everything that we have drawn on for this last year-ish and make informed recommendations. And we're all, intelligent, informed people at this point, and probably were when we started too. But in any case, I think we're in a position to do that. So I do think that majority opinion or recommendation or whatever we're calling it is informed by people who were informed and by us who are now very informed. And like I said, there was no intent to vilify or disrespect. It was really, those were things that happened. And I understand that you missed it, but, they were pretty significant. And in my experience with leadership, you don't watch things happen and then not work to fix them. The structure that allowed those problems to arise. You take steps to address the problems, to close the loopholes so that they don't happen again, even if it only happened once. In my last position, we had a huge embezzlement. We didn't stop and say, well, it only happened once, so we're not going to plug the holes or look at our financial systems. No, you batten down the hatches and you say, how do we structure things, change our processes, change our procedures so that this can never happen again? And so that, I think, is part of what is underlying that argument about what we've seen in the last couple of years. It may never have happened before, I'm not really sure, but it should never happen again, and we should set it up so that it can't.
Yeah, I would add to that. I think particularly because of Zoom, where it becomes much easier to go to meetings, that the residents, citizens of Wenham are paying more attention than they ever have to town government, not just the select board, but school committee and other committees. People are showing up in droves. They are engaged. They did a recall petition last year because people were shocked to find out that you couldn't fire a select board member. They were shocked and upset. And we're like, well, what else is going on that we don't know about? And in my other roles, I do know that people are considering running for select board. And I'm also mentoring people and getting them to join committees and get more engaged with the town. And, people like Jeremy are able to be on a committee now because they're working from home permanently. So the pandemic has really changed a lot. And part of that is people are not just handing over control of town government to the people who've always done it. They're really paying a lot more attention and bringing their own professional experience, which is amazing in this community, and being engaged. And what they don't want to be engaged with is a dysfunctional system. So even if it's incrementally more functional, and one thing we have learned is that government moves slowly, right? So I think I too came in thinking, well, 5 makes sense, but let me see what the data looks like. Let me see what other people are saying. And like Deirdre, I was very much persuaded by it. And I have also learned a lot about, a weak town administrator versus a strong town manager. And I think there's a lot of education that needs to be done with the general public to help them understand what our options are. And that's probably not going to be part of the master planning process, but maybe it could be. At least there could be a discussion about, here's how our government works. Here's what a select board member does here versus in Hamilton now, which has changed to a 5-member board and a town manager. Here's how those things are different and what are our options going forward and the mechanism by which you would make that happen. Because I think it is a black box to most people how town government works. But more and more people are learning about it.
And here, I'll take a moment to plug. Hopefully we can get Citizens Leadership Academy up and running again. And as town moderator, I am more than
Yeah.
be part of that process of getting that going. So that's on my list of things to do, is to coordinate with Ryan about that.
But I would look at how can we make it more accessible to
Yeah.
people who have small children or
That's
who
right.
commute, or,
Yeah.
you know, like committing to, I don't know, it's like 10 Wednesday nights is really hard for a lot of people. So how
Yeah.
can we make it easier to do for more people?
And
This was the first year I was able to do it and it got canceled. So
it is one of the lead stories on the town website that it's still out there, and that should be probably taken down until we do reactivate the Citizens Academy. So I am not an advocate of forcing change on either the minority or the majority report from the other side, but I do think that there are disparaging comments in the minority report about the data collection and the laxity that I would hope to be removed. But if not, it's something the majority report could address in the response to the minority report. Maybe that's the avenue to go. I want to be very cognizant of squelching any voices. So that's the way I would handle it. I would ask, Harriet and Mike to take a look at that and say, is that really the word choice that you want to go with? Because I do think we tried to get more data, and it was difficult. People weren't responding.
Patrick, would you make this, the recording of this Zoom available to us as soon as possible? So that, for example, Mike could follow our discussions?
I can try. I can ask for the recording. I can ask for it to be posted on YouTube, which I will do.
Okay.
I hope that I think all of our meetings, all of our recent meetings have been posted to the YouTube channel.
My understanding is a recording on Zoom is accessible by going to the Zoom link and requesting it. I say that because I was told that by my daughter-in-law, who arranged for the recording of the Zoom memorial service we did for my wife. So I don't know if I'm not sure you need anything other than to go back into the right, to the background of this meeting, but I defer that to others. I was told that, but I don't know how to do it.
the host of the meeting would need to share that, but I think in our case, we just put it on YouTube. So it's the same.
Yeah, and I know a bunch of them, I'm looking at HWCAM's Wenham page right now, a bunch of them are on there. Looks like the last one was the November 4th. So there might be a couple of meetings behind, but yeah.
They do get out there.
But I'm sure Ryan could share the link if someone needs to watch it right away.
I would ask if somebody can help me find the data set, Deirdre. I apologize for mischaracterization. I was footing not off what you wrote, but on what appeared to be a drive to get, information from a group that was less worthy. I would say this real quick. There's a dichotomy in my professional experience as a lawyer. You believe in precedent, and the rules and prior experience. And so my bias has been to the people who've been in the trenches and done this stuff, and the reports that came to the same result. On the other hand, I've also been responsible for public relations and that sort of stuff. And how you develop public support for something is entirely different from what the precedents are. And I commend the majority here for the vitality and the optimism that you're expressing. And I think it's I think it draws an interesting comparison, and I'm going to be very fascinated to see how the voting comes out. But as I said, it's not clear to me that there's a wrong decision here. And if it ends up with more people and more confidence in government, then that's good.
Well, let me just share my screen just to show you where to get to the documents. You see my screen?
Yeah.
Yep.
Okay. Research documents folder, left-hand side.
Mm-hmm.
Opens here. So the final reports are in this report sections here,
Yeah.
all caps. And here's where we've been populating the reports. So the shell, which incorporates the research methods and results, is here, the final report shell. And again, Roger's done a nice job with the introduction. It doesn't start with pursuant anymore. It walks through data collection, how we started, what we did with the research, how we gathered it. I will say, when I printed this out, the text boxes, the graphics are very blurry.
Okay.
I wonder if that's the Google Drive. Did
Oh,
you
yeah.
print it off from Google Drive, or did you actually download the Word document and print it off from Word?
I did it from Google Drive.
That might be why.
Yeah.
The reason
That's
why
why.
it's showing the SEQ rather than like the actual caption, like some
It
of
was one
that.
of my comments as well.
Yeah.
Okay.
So if you actually download it and print it off from Word rather than printing it from the Google Drive, you'll probably get a cleaner copy, Pat.
Okay, I will do that. Okay, good. So that, Paul, that's where the document lives. And I'm trying to clean out the things that are not going to be part of this report. Let me stop the sharing.
Yeah, I want to say I did go into the, so I thought I saw research documents and I went in there and there were like 2 documents in there. Not what you just showed me wasn't in the research documents that I got into, which is how I became frustrated. And now I'm trying to see if I can reconstruct what happened to me. But anyway, I don't want to spend anybody's time on this. I think if push come to shove, is somebody, I'll make a shot over the weekend to find it. And if I can't, maybe somebody can just print out a copy and mail it to me or email. I mean, I don't
Email it to
regard
you.
it. I think it wouldn't be, since it's a public document, I don't think it would be a violation of open meeting law if somebody sent me a copy of it by email as an attachment.
I can send you, I'll download it and send you a copy, Paul.
That would be great, because I really feel badly, Deirdre, about having,
No, it's okay. I just wanted you to.
No, it's good. And I'm curious to see whether I'm right that, the data actually supports either argument, depending on how you want to assemble them and weight them.
So Paul, I put a link to the research summary in the chat a while ago. So
Oh, okay. Let me see if I can.
just to make it.
Kirsten,
jump
was
right in.
that Deirdre's original document, or because I modified
That's-
it?
I am not sure.
Hold on, let me put a link to the shell document in the chat, because that
Okay.
is the updated.
So one thing that would be helpful before we end tonight is to know what documents I should be looking at to comment on if I'm sending in comments, so I don't send it to one that's already been commented on. If that makes sense.
Did you read the majority?
Yeah.
Recommendation? Okay, all right.
Yeah.
Are you good for now? Or do you
I-
have stuff?
We'll probably have stuff. I don't want to do it on the fly here if we're not going to go through them line by line, but I'll send in some stuff.
Paul, I'm sending you an email right now with the Word document.
Thank you. So now I'm presently stumped on how to record Deirdre's chat link, because I figure if I click on that, I'm going to lose the Zoom call.
No, you won't. It'll just
No.
pop open something else. Yeah.
I wanted to just touch briefly on the KP Law document. So this is the steps that would have to go through to get to, if we're to go to town meeting and it's approved. Or no, this is the warrant article. So there are 3 main issues that we have. If you read the document, when they get to the warrant article, it's section 1, section 2, section 4. Section 3 is not there.
Patrick, could you share the document?
Oh, yes, absolutely.
That would be
Sorry.
easier, I think.
Yep. Okay, so it's this KP Law. Everyone can see it?
Mhm.
Okay. It speaks on how is it going to be implemented, some assumptions, but we go down to the actual warrant article. So we're starting with to see if this is the actual warrant article. So you see section 1, section 2, section 4. So I've reached out to Ryan, who reached out to KP Law to say, are we missing something or is it just a typo? The second issue is later on in the second to last line of above section 5 and section 4. And the person receiving the next highest number of votes shall be elected a 2-year term with space, period. So obviously there's something missing there. And then the substantive issue I have is in the actual first line of the warrant article, to see if the town of Wenham will vote to authorize the select board. I spoke with a higher power today and said, should we be authorizing or should we be directing? This is town meeting. Should the town meeting be authorizing or should they be directing? And it was agreed that it should be directing, not authorizing. Remember, the town council reports to the select board. So, and then the other change that was suggested is to change select board here to town administrator or town clerk to actually file the petition with the general court. So you take the select board out of that initial filing. So it's not a political issue at that point. It's a clerical issue. Go ahead, Roger.
One other thing I noticed about this draft article is, and this is an open issue, and I'm not sure it can be addressed through this, but it is actually the manner of election. This contemplates using the ranking system, whereas as we've discussed, albeit briefly, another option would be to use 2 separate seat and have 2 separate elections. So candidates pull for seat 1 or for seat 2. So I don't know how we as a committee address that within the context of a draft warrant article, other than you could have, draft section 2 option 1, draft section 2 option 2, depending on what the select board chooses to put on the warrant, if they choose to put anything at all.
So funny you should say that, because that was going to be my one of my next points. Before we get there, I also wanted to go to section 4. And personally, I wanted to skip this. I thought section 4 says it's going to go to the ballot it'll go to town meeting. If it passes town meeting, then it'll go to the ballot. So that's another year. And then you would have an election either at that same time or the subsequent year. So personally, I think to put a question whether you want to move 3 to 5 and then put candidates on the same ballot just confuses the issue. Rather keep things clean and simple, personally. But I was of the mind that, hey, this has already gone to town meeting once in a non-binding warrant article, and people overwhelmingly were in favor of at least studying. If we go to town meeting again and the vote is clear, do we really need to delay a year in implementation? Again, I was told by a higher power that it would be most likely the general court would come back and ask for this to be inserted back in, which could take an additional year. So now we're talking 2 to 3 years before implementation. So it was suggested that the section 4 remain, that it does go to the ballot after town meeting.
Patrick, if the majority feels strongly on the ballot, no ballot issue, my reading of the K&P memo, and I may have done some independent research about it, is that it is not required that there be a ballot beyond town meeting. It is sometimes suggested back from Boston that be done. And it seems to me that K&P, if not Ryan, ought to be able to find out, in effect, whether they're going to require it or not. And we ought to find it out. I mean, we contact authorities in Boston all the time about how to write and submit things to them so that it doesn't get kicked out for that reason. So I think that can be clarified. And as I say, I think it's really more a question of, do you want the ballot or do you not want the ballot? You don't want the ballot because of the delay involved in it. And I think that's a fair point. As to the authorize the selectmen language, that is routine boilerplate. And I've always interpreted it, when it's happened in the past, as a directive from town meeting. In other words, it would be difficult for the selectmen. Now, sometimes there's saving language in there, which Roger would know, which says to authorize the selectmen and to make such changes as are necessary to carry out the intent of this article. So that if in fact there's somebody in Boston says you got to make this change, that the selectmen need to be authorized to make the change. The clerk wouldn't have that authorization. So I would just caution you to think about that. Anyway, that issue.
Yeah, but I would actually leave the authorization to make changes, to make amendments suggested by Boston at the select board level. The problem with authorizing as opposed to directing, and authorizing the select board as opposed to the town clerk or town administrator, is I'll go back to setting up this committee. On 10/17/20, special town meeting said set up this committee. On 11/19 was the first discussion of the select board of this committee. On 1/19/21, 3 months later, the committee was set up. 1 month after that, we had our first meeting. So we wasted 4 months waiting for the select board, waiting for this committee to meet. So if it is directed to the town administrator or the town clerk, they don't have skin in the game. They don't. Hey, I was told to do this. I'm going to do it. It's not. There's no foot dragging. No stalling. You're authorized to do it, but you're not directed to. And I think there's something to be gained there to remove it from the select board, to file the petition, and do it by direction, not authorization. Roger?
It's separate from that, but still on this topic. What I think it would make sense for the committee to urge have happen is that KP prepare a revised memo that lays out the possible building blocks of the warrant article and what their various permutations may be. And then, because at the end of the day, the select board is going to decide what to do based on our recommendation and our report. And then, depending on what the select board does, the citizens of the town, either through a warrant article or through a petition, may choose to do something at town meeting, including to amend what is presented in a motion. So I think it would be most helpful for everyone involved in the process going forward if the various building blocks are in one document, and then if the majority expresses a preference on how this goes forward, it can do that. That would be my suggestion.
I will also just on the vote, whether or not we go to the ballot or not, I will raise the issue that we've lost a long-standing representative. We have a new representative, which is great, but she's only going to be there for a year. and then we're going to have 2 representatives for our one town. So not a lot. Freshman numbers don't carry a lot of weight. So if Brad was still there, maybe I could call him up and say, hey, what's this going to take? We have a freshman representative who hasn't been seated yet. And how much authority is she going to have going into this? And this is nothing against Jamie Balsito. It's just the inner workings of Boston. So that's why I would be more inclined to leave the election, the ballot question in there, because it would be more likely to get through Boston and back to us. But yes, I agree with you, Roger. Break it down step by step, and then we can work from there. And to your other point on the election format, I was actually putting together a document. I have not shared it. I was putting together a document laying out the different scenarios, and should we as a committee recommend one over another to the select board, what KP actually has in here is 2 elections, one for the incumbent seat, the existing seat. There will be 1 election for that, and then there'll be another election for the 2 open seats, where the top vote getter would get a 3-year term and the second vote getter would get the 2-year term. Instead of having 3 elections.
Yeah, and the reason why I raised that is because I know in one of the interviews I did with a town that made the move, they employed the rank election, and there was some significant criticism of it.
I remember reading that, yes. But is that, do we want to put a recommendation? I am personally in favor of recommending to the select board as much as we can the format of how this is going to be implemented, and then static state, how we move forward. Good, Kirsten?
I would recommend that they be individual elections, because someone may want to run for a 2-year term who does not want to run for a 3-year term. And if they got the 3-year term, they wouldn't be too happy. So I just think for cleanliness, that makes sense. But, I'm not bound to that. I just think from a candidate perspective, like if you're making that kind of commitment, you kind of want to know ahead of time what you're signing up for.
Yep. Makes sense. And this is not something we need to determine tonight, because we should probably lay out what the scenarios are, and then what our choice would be. Of course, time goes short, but I can reach back out to KP Law through Ryan and get them to rework this memo and break it down to each step and what our options are. And then come back and we can choose, lay out the entire process, and then highlight what we suggest, what our recommendation would be, if people are good with that. And then, I did have one other piece on the majority report. You talked about the stipends. So I'm still sharing my screen, so that's good.
Sorry, what did you say? The what?
The stipends.
Oh, yeah.
So I was able to pull all the stipends. And you'll see we're quite high. I ranked it on average stipend. So we're number 4 in Essex County. I would want included in there that stipends are set by the select board and authorized by town meeting, and that we're high. There's no reason that I can see that we should be number 4 when we're not number 4 in all the other salaries that we pay. My personal view is that select board should be pro bono. You're doing it for the good of the town. You're not doing it, and I understand it's not a lot of money. You're not putting a lot of money in your pocket, but I do think my personal view is that we should sunset stipends. When these terms are over, they drop to zero. And will that eliminate candidates? I don't know. But if you're not willing to serve for no money, then thank you very much, is my personal view.
Or move to Newbury.
I mean, I think the data is very interesting, so thank you for doing that. I'm not in favor of abolishing it in Wenham, to be honest, particularly when we're trying to go to 5 to make the job less appealing, I think is sort of counterproductive. I mean, it's still essentially doing it for no money, really. This is, you know, it's still kind of just a token. And if you split it, if you kept that number and split it among 5, it's sort of less of a token and it would shift where we are. You know, we are kind of high for 3. But I just think, I don't think it helps the cause to bring more people into running to say, well, we used to do this, but we're taking it away now. That's my opinion.
Now, again, with the benefits, we have this policy that might be in place, we think is in place. but
That's
that-
more important.
But that can easily be removed by any board at any time. That's a policy. So any select board in the future could remove that language if it's in place now. We're not sure if it's in place. Removing the stipend removes that altogether.
Yeah, but Patrick, all that requires is if it is the will of the selectmen to do it, then they put a warrant article in to make it official. If the past board ruling is not felt to be sufficient, then you put it in the bylaw. I mean, I think there are a lot of these issues. That's what was one of my points, is that there's a lot of these sort of tangential issues, but which can be significant. This is one of them. You certainly don't want to go to 5 and discover that you've made $100,000 mistake. So you need to make sure that gets fixed, and to certain things need to be in place before the 5, you know. And then there, I know Roger, I'm sure, can construct this. I've constructed it in the past, votes that says, you know, provided that Article 1 passes, Article 2, so that you can make sure that you're not going to step in something inadvertently. That's going to be a logical sequence of making a series of decisions about restructuring town government.
I would have hoped, you know, this is not a secret issue. This is known by the FinCom. This is known by the select board. I would hope that, you know, they take it up now, and it can be taken up right now. To either say, okay, this was done in 2002. Let's do it again right now. It's just an article on an agenda.
I mean, who has the ball at this point, right? Someone's supposed to be figuring out whether the last time this went through, if it actually stuck, right? Is that town council now?
I think
I thought
Ryan was working on it.
I thought he said he had to go back to town council to find out if it was enacted, right? So we need to know that.
Yeah, I mean, I think it would be helpful somewhere in our final document that people are going to see to talk about. There are some issues that came up during this work, including how would you deal with stipends, and addendum, you know, Appendix A shows what Essex County stipends are. And there is a potential issue of state law saying that if you get paid $1 or more, you are eligible for benefits. However, in the past, that's been disallowed at Wenham, and then have whatever clarifying language we have.
Kirsten, I had in the
Is that in there?
I had put in a section for additional observations.
Okay, great. I think
And
that
I put in some suggested topics or possible topics for additional
Okay.
recommendations. To put it in the final report, I think we would have to, as a committee, agree, you know,
Right.
by majority vote, possibly by unanimous vote, depending on how we ultimately decide to approve this document in its final form.
So what is that document named? Oh, the final TGSC final report shall?
Yeah.
Okay, so does it also talk about town administrator, town manager?
It
Right.
does briefly.
Role of town administrator is one of the possible additional observations.
Yeah, I think that's a place where we could educate people about
Yep.
that there
That
is a
was-
difference, you know,
That was
we-
the intent.
currently put the supervisory power for the town into the hands of citizens rather than a professional trained in that. Although the citizens may be a professional trained in that, but not in that capacity. You know, that's not their official capacity in our town. You know, and that all of these positions, town clerk, town administrator, town manager, have become more and more professionalized and have specific training paths and career paths that did not exist 350 years ago. Right.
So this is, the intended audience is well aware of this issue.
I
So
don't think so. I
so
don't think your general
This,
citizen has any idea of all that.
this document is intended for the select board, and they are very aware of this issue.
Sure.
Yeah, but Patrick, let's be honest, like this document is a report to the select board, but we are certainly intending the audience to be the public as a whole.
Yeah, this is for the town.
And I, as someone who's abstaining, you know, have no problem saying this. I think every word of this document should be viewed as going to the town. Yes, it's a report to the select board, but this is, make your case to the town as well in this document. And if there are additional neutral issues or observations or points of education, this is the document to be, but we're not going to get another chance. It is.
Yep.
Yeah,
Agreed.
it's particularly because we did ask to have that specific thing added to our charge, and it was not added to our charge. So it's a question left out there for the future. And as Paul saw, you know, it was discussed before and then nothing happened. So people need to know that it is an ongoing issue, that whether we stay at 3 or 5, that I mean, I think everyone knows we have a pretty bad track record of holding on to a town administrator, and this may explain why, in part.
Oh, no, wait a minute. If I could speak on that, please. Wenham cannot attract a good town administrator by many standards. We are too small. We can't pay enough. Ryan can attest to that. We pay maybe as much as $50,000 less than other towns pay. This is an entry-level position. And if we can get someone to stay with us for 3 or 4 years, like Peter Lombardi, that's wonderful. We're
But
never
Harriet-
going to get a
Harriet-
full-time.
Harriet, we only pay 10,000 less than Hamilton. On the last budgets, we were $10,000 away. And Hamilton's got a town manager as opposed to a town administrator. So the pay isn't that far off.
Well, I'm privy to more information that I'm not going to share right this minute, but I will tell you that the going rate is higher. Joe D. in Hamilton was hired how many years ago?
I was
3
looking at
maybe?
the last budget. I do understand that he has received a raise since then, but I looked at the last budget and there's only a $10,000 difference between the two, roughly $10,000.
And what do you mean between Joe and Ryan, correct?
Yes.
Okay.
I don't know if Ryan was in place at our last budget. But our
I
last
don't
budget-
want to get into negotiations and discussion of salaries, but that job for Ryan was posted sufficiently lower than what we ended up paying him. Okay, so
no,
let's
no,
let that go for
no,
the
no,
moment, but
I'm talking about the budget. The budget is what the town voted on, the
I
budget.
realize that, and he got exactly what was in the budget. What I'm saying is, I'm addressing Kirsten's point about why we've had such a big turnover. We had Jeff Shelgren for a dozen years, at least 10. So it isn't the quality of the selectmen or the number of the selectmen. It's that we're a small town. It's not a prestigious town. It's not like North Andover or Wellesley or Dover. We have to understand who we are. That's one of the problems in all of this discussion, as I said a few minutes ago. We don't know who we are and what our assets are and what we can actually deliver. I rest my case.
Yeah, I take issue with basically that in its entirety. The salaries are all public information, first of all, so I'm not sure what you're alluding to that you know or something. But the town administrators that I've seen, and again, I have a shorter lens than many of you, are extremely professional. Anthony Ansaldi was a professional. Tom Younger is a professional. And Ryan is a professional. He is not an entry-level person. So I actually see it the reverse, Harriet, that the problem is not actually in who we seem to be attracting. And I've heard that Peter Lombardi was a star from all accounts. I actually think that there is something else going on as to why there's so much turnover and disruption in town hall, because these are professionals that have been in those jobs. They're highly trained, highly experienced professionals. And I think to suggest otherwise is really kind of disrespectful to them, actually.
I agree, Deirdre, completely. I think we need to do some soul searching and find out why we are experiencing the turnover we are. And it's not just as the town administrator. We just lost another employee. We're losing an employee within a week or two. Why? And there's something going on. And it's not just pay. It's not just pay. So.
That said, Patrick, I agree that it's a concern, but man, we're all taking shots in the dark here on this, because I don't think it can any longer be attributable to a particular board roster. You know, we've turned over 2 seats on the board, and by my view of things, the current 3 members are doing an admirable job. So yeah, there's something going on. Who knows? It could be pay. I mean, I can't speak for the municipal government field, but I know in the legal field, man, salaries are going crazy. And you know, I don't know, maybe there are towns out there that have cash to throw around and are, you know, poaching our employees. I'm guessing just as much as the rest of us, but you know, yeah, we've got a bunch of issues we got to face. This committee has to figure out what it needs to say about one of them and what related observations it might make about others that tie into that issue. But we're not, the 7 of us aren't going to solve all the town's problems as much as we might want to.
Not this week, anyway.
Go ahead, Deirdre.
The last time we discussed this about the additional observations or sort of suggestions for future research, we basically agreed that we would just state this issue of looking at the powers of the town administrator vis-a-vis the select board and the strength of the job description and so forth without opining, because I'm going to repeat what I said the last time. We've not done that research, all of us together, to be able to define weak and strong. We never read the job description. I actually read it separately, but we collectively have not read the job description, the bylaws, the general laws, and so forth. So I feel very strongly that in that section, we should not be opining. We should be stating that this is an area that should be looked at. And I think, Paul, I understand it was in that 2012 report, but unfortunately, we've never seen it.
Yeah, I understand, and
Yeah.
I'm sorry not to have been able to produce it. As I say, much of it was enacted in the bylaws that were put in place in 2015. There were a number of disparate authority, blurry lines of authority. The one that didn't go forward was to formally invest the office with certain powers. So regardless of who was sitting there, they had those powers, and they didn't have to get approval. I mean, you'd be prudent to work closely with your boss, but anyway. So that's the background of that, and it's not all that probative at this point in time, other than, as I say, I think it does reflect the fact that it didn't go forward then. And that maybe some people now are not in favor of it, is that they kind of like the, if you will, the intimacy of the small board with the town operations. And, you know, it's going to be a question of shifting that mindset, which is repeatedly held. There was when Jack Wilhelm ran to displace Molly Martin, that was a very progressive board. They had a number of things, and shall we say, the people who voted in the election, which is less than 10% of the town, or less, yeah, only about 10% of the town, they said, no, let's go back to the way we used to do it. And so those progressives were all replaced in due course. So, I mean, that's why I say it'll be interesting to see whether there's enough interest in doing something different, you know, to carry at town meeting. It'll be interesting to see.
So I think sorry, Kirsten, just on the additional observations, I have three that could just be listed as topics, and the benefits issue, and just lay out what the issue is, TA versus TM authority, and appointed versus elected, town clerk especially. Those would be the three issues that I would see being added there.
Maybe the election, how the election is run and timing of the election.
Is that something that we want to opine on?
I mean, I think it's important to say, to set expectations for people about what they might expect.
But that's something I personally would like to opine on. I think this committee.
No, I think the minority and majority should opine on them, but I think in this section, there could be like, here are various options that have been presented, you know, that are unclear or could go multiple ways, you know.
I was thinking,
because if someone is voting and they're like, okay, so next month we're gonna have an election, right? And it's like, no, it's 2 years from now. That's like a whole different mindset to go in. So I think we need to like let people know, you know, sort of the paths that might happen without saying we recommend this or that. That comes in a different area. Right?
So perhaps a timeline of what would happen if each step was successful to going to 5. But I think the election format, that could be outside of the additional observations, as Deidre said, is just facts, just straight facts.
Yeah.
And then, and instead of putting it in the minority and majority report, if we could come to a consensus on what we think the correct election format would be, we could say, here are the options, and this is the one that this committee recommends.
Yeah.
So they put it in kind of a separate addendum.
Yeah. Also, just on the town administrator, town manager thing, in 2018, it was reported that Joe was hired at 140,000, and our budget for FY22 for town administrator is 139,909. So I'm sure after 3 years he's gotten a raise, but they're pretty similar for a much bigger town too.
Yeah, I pulled budget to budget, and I think it was the FY22s, and I want to say it was a little better than 10,000, maybe 11 or 12,000, but it was not it is substantial, but you also have different authorities and different roles and responsibilities.
Right.
So he's a TM, Ryan's a TA. But if you
That's a different set of research that would have to be done by another committee or this committee in the future if reconstituted.
I know where $11,474 are. We'll go there. All right. Let me stop this. So. Are we good here? So schedule a public forum. Are we ready to move forward? Well, first, next meeting, do we need to meet in 1 week, or should we just have a break until the 16th? So we had it out there last time that we would meet either the 9th, that's a possibility, or just wait until the 16th.
What do we need to do next, I guess? So for my side, I guess I'm going to go back to the majority opinion and try to connect some data points into it. And actually, I didn't read what Roger worked on yet. So like, what's the goal for next time? Because I think that influences how soon we meet.
I think it was just to tighten up the report, to do, as you said, to figure out any more addenda that we want to add. So we've got the 4, well, and go back to KP Law and get them to tighten up their memo and break that out. I will take that on. And add the benefits, TATM, appointed, elected, and a timeline if each step is successful in the march to 5. And then election format, we could vote on and opine next time and see if it's something we want to add to the report. And the hope would be to get to pretty much final form by the 16th, I think.
Or close to, or close to it. It's like
Yes.
a final round of comments on the 16th.
Yes. So
And
do you
who's-
think we need to meet on the 9th?
Do we need to go through like line by line?
Hopefully
Together?
not.
Well, I mean, like, don't we have to deliberate together on it? So, I don't know.
I believe that we do have to, minority and majority, the whole committee has to opine on the shell. We don't need to agree on each other's reports. And then on the addenda, we need to agree with what we have out there, and that we've got what we need and we don't need any more.
Just as much as I don't want to meet weekly, not because I don't love everyone's company, but just because it's a very hectic time of year, both professionally and personally. I think the committee needs to. I think in order to get this report to where it needs to be to publish it for January 1 in draft form, we unless we're planning on meeting on December 23rd, which, guys, I hate to say it, I really don't want to.
So why don't we meet next week?
I think we need to do the 9th and the 16th.
Okay.
And if we don't need the 16th, then it's a bonus.
Yep.
Would it be possible
Dave.
on the 9th to meet earlier, like 5:30? I have another meeting at 7. So
And Dave has a conflict.
Dave has a conflict too, so.
Just report the calendar and make sure.
I could do really any time on the 9th.
How about other folks?
I could go 5:30. That's not a problem.
Dave you'll have a double header. Is that okay? Slugger.
We'll put the dog in the chair for one of them, just like Bill Belichick.
I'm just here for the dogs.
So next meeting will be 12/9 at 5:30, and hopefully we'll get closer to a final draft. Tentatively scheduled for the 16th as well. And we want to be published by the end of the year, hopefully. So then a public forum. Let me just go back to our timeline. We have it out there for 1/12, which is a Wednesday.
I have a
That's-
position that day, but probably be done in time for a public forum. So
And that date does not need to be set in stone. Unlike the CPC, where you have to 2 weeks in the newspaper. We'll tentatively say the 12th. If there's another date, we can slide that one a little bit. I did reach out to the select board on presenting to them, and keeping in mind that February 4th is the drop dead on the warrant articles. The warrant closes on the 4th. Let me just pull up, see if I can find that email. Yep. They're planning on meetings on the 4th and 18th. Let's see, and then she says, we're penciling reporting for the 14th. So that, I think she meant the 18th. So the 18th would be with the joint meeting with the select board, or at least an agenda item where we could present to the select board.
are we realistically going to be able to get what is the draft of the report that is published pre-forum into a final form, like final form, between a forum on the 12th and a select board meeting on the 18th? Does not sound reasonable or likely to me. Do we need to move up the forum date?
I
Possibly,
think
yeah.
it should mostly be, do you think there'll be extensive revisions? I don't think so.
No, but we have to do it at a meeting. We have to do it at a public meeting.
Oh, I see.
Yeah.
We have to A, finalize it, make any changes, and then B, vote to accept and deliver the report.
Could we have a meeting immediately after the forum?
We could.
Just piggyback it?
We could, oh, definitely, yes. Yes.
Like that
So-
night, right? Yeah.
Yeah, so the same thing we're doing with the CPC. We have a public hearing, and we'll close the public hearing and just go into a regular meeting. So yes, we can definitely do that. And see if there's anything that we want to add or change or.
Yeah.
Okay. Does that work for everyone?
It's aggressive and doesn't allow much time for further deliberation, but with the timeline we have, I don't see much alternative unless we bump the public forum back to the first week of January. And
But that's vacation week.
it's
No, I'm sorry.
it's actually it's not. School resumes on the 3rd.
Third, yeah, so everyone's
But we're
back.
gonna need a planning meeting
Yeah,
before we do.
we
that.
are.
Okay. So we'll plan on meeting in that first week of January. We're back to weekly meetings, but the end is near.
I was gonna say, there's a light. There's a light at the end of the tunnel.
It's in April or May.
Yeah, the question is just whether it's under a tent or at the gymnasium at Bucher.
Yeah. So we'll figure on a 12-9 meeting at 5:30, 12-16 meeting, a meeting the week of the 3rd, and then the forum on the 12th, or thereabouts. And again, we can firm up these dates. As long as we have the next 2 dates firm, we should be good.
So do we want to meet on January 5th?
Who's normally Wednesday? Who are the Wednesday meetings? We're normally a Thursday,
Finance
Yeah.
committee.
Wednesday's FinCom.
so we probably want to stick with Thursdays.
Oh, sorry. I'm
Yeah.
thinking
so-
today is Wednesday.
no.
Thankfully, no.
No.
Oh my gosh.
So the 16th is 12-16 is Thursday. We skip Christmas.
So the
So
6th.
we're gonna 1-6. And I don't know why we said the 12th instead of the 13th. But we can definitely do a 13th. That's probably, again, sticking with the, Thursday.
There was some reason, Patrick.
usually Dave.
I have
It
a
is a
board
planning
meeting on
board.
the 13th.
Kirsten, you have one as well, did you say?
I do.
Okay. Is that why, that's why we went to the 12th?
Yeah.
This is pretty important, so we might be able to preempt someone.
Does that give us enough time to have an agenda for the public forum? Or can we set that earlier?
So it would be,
If that meeting is a planning meeting for the public forum, it's less than a week later, right?
no, absolutely. The agenda just has to be posted 48 hours prior. So,
Okay,
and you don't have to say, you try to put what you're going to discuss, but it doesn't have to be minutia.
okay.
That would be fine. So 1-6, planning, and 1-12 forum and meeting afterwards. Good.
So is someone fleshing out that section on the, what did we call it? Future observations or something? Or Roger, do you want to, or do you want me to take it?
Yeah, no, I'll do it.
Okay.
Nice and just the facts, man.
You know it.
Yeah. All right.
The perspective from Switzerland, as Kirsten said.
Right, exactly.
I don't want to get into Swiss history, but it might not have been totally neutral, but let's not go there. Okay, what else do we have here? We got the frequency. I don't think we need too much more on the agenda. We're just going to finalize the reports.
Continued deliberation. Review final report drafts. Discuss public forum. Yeah.
Yep. Okay. Good.
I mean, we have to get the word out about the public forum.
That can fall into discuss public forum. How do we do it?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think
And
we'll probably just employ what we did for the October one. And hope that.
I think we need to do more.
Maybe we can we got from 1 to 3. Maybe we can get from 3 to, to
Well,
5 or
I know
six.
there's a graphic of everyone who voted at town meeting. Maybe we could just reach out to them and say, hey, it's on the agenda. Come on.
I will say that most of the publicizing was done by Jackie, and now we've lost her and her replacement, so. But we have Michelle McGovern is now in place as administrative assistant to the TA. So we're down 2 plus 1. Yikes.
Progress.
What's that? Anything else?
Motion to adjourn?
Second,
Deirdre?
Oh,
Yes,
did you call me? Yes.
yes, I'm sorry. Roger,
yes.
Kirsten,
Yes.
Harriet,
Yes.
Dave,
Aye.
and I'm an I as well. Thank you very much, folks.
Bye, everybody.
Have
Good
a good
Good
job.
night, everyone.
Good night.
See you next week.
Thanks, guys.
Thank you.
Bye.
Thank you, Catherine. Thank you very much.
You're welcome.